What's up, wrestling fans? It is time for another edition of The Voice of Wrestling. I'm your host, as always, alongside Nick Paglino. And Nick, I'm excited, man. We've got plenty to talk about, as we do every single week. And look, it's a good week to be a WWE stockholder. And we're going to talk about the huge deal that WWE just landed with Fox for 2019. We're going to talk about that in the main event. We've got a ton of random things to talk about. We're also going to take a trip maybe outside of WWE this week on The Voice of Wrestling and talk about the huge All-In pay-per-view that's coming up. Talk about Chris Jericho.
Well, not a pay-per-view yet.
Or not a pay-per-view yet. You're right. They're just a huge event. Right. It's not even a pay-per-view, which is kind of...
Feels like it's a pay-per-view.
It should.
Feels like it wants to be a pay-per-view.
It should be a pay-per-view, and that's kind of a bone I have to pick with Cody Rhodes and those dudes. But talk about that. Of course, we've got our Roman watch, and we talk about him almost every week. Ronda Rousey. Talk a little bit about her as well, plus some random things as well. But before we jump into the main event, Nick, how are you doing on this Tuesday?
I'm doing well on this Tuesday, and you kicked off the show by saying that you were doing good, and of course you're doing good. I know why you're doing good. Your boy Jinder Mahal, who is not only going to be challenging for the IC title on Raw next week,
right? Not
only is he going to go up against Roman Reigns one-on-one at Money in the Bank, but he just landed WWE a $2 billion television rights deal. So you got to be flying high today.
I know. He absolutely did it all by himself. I think it's great. By the way, too, and I know this is this isn't related, but I'm gonna make it related. The NBA playoffs are taking place, and I'm a huge sports fan in general, and so I love watching superstars do what superstars do. You've got Kevin Durant, Steph Curry, look like they're probably going to take Boston here in 5, maybe 6 at the most. And then, of course, Houston. And then, of course, you've got Cleveland, who looks like they were toast after every series, the first game or two. Looks like they're now going to come back and beat Boston. And so I'm excited, but more excited for the simple fact that I love superstars. I watch golf when Tiger Woods is playing. I love watching Tom Brady and the New England Patriots win. If it's not my Cowboys, I want to see greatness be great. And I feel like there's a huge lack of that in pro wrestling in general. The superstars just aren't created these days. The ones that you have to go out of your way, love them or hate them. And later on in the show, Nick, I know during our Roman watch, we're going to talk more about Roman Reigns. And maybe if he's shaping up to be that somewhat as kind of that tweener heel babyface. In an interview that he just did recently, he talked a little bit about, aren't I already a heel? You guys want me to turn heel? Maybe I already am. He talked about working with Daniel Bryan would be kind of the ultimate thing for him in a heel program, whether he really crossed that line or not. And so plenty, like I said, to talk about. However, we're going to hold our thoughts on all of that, and we're going to jump into the main event in this mega deal that WWE just landed and what questions it poses for WWE and its product, and of course, what we can expect as wrestling fans right here on The Voice of Wrestling. It's the main event. Chris Cash, Nick Paglino talking about the major story of the week, which obviously is a 5-year, over $1 billion deal for WWE now that they just landed with Fox. And Nick, ProWrestling.com has been on top of this all week. Give us the latest before we kind of jump into what this actually means.
Well, like you said here, the very latest is, of course, the deal has not yet been announced. But the feeling right now is that, it has been agreed to in principle. It should be announced very shortly. This will be a 5-year deal worth $205 million a year, making this deal just north of $1 billion. It will bring SmackDown Live over to Friday nights on Fox. The questions that are still lingering, the biggest one probably is, will SmackDown remain a live show? That has not been determined yet. There is feeling by some that it may go back to being a taped show. There is feeling by others that it will remain live. I think for the most part, the feeling is it will remain live. It will air in its normal 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern time slot on Friday night. And that's what we know as of right now. And we know that when you couple that with the massive deal that NBC Universal is expected to offer WWE to retain the TV rights to Monday Night Raw on the USA Network on Monday nights, you are looking at a total package deal here, just a TV rights deal here that is just north of $2 billion, which is just a historic television rights deal in professional wrestling.
And, I can also confirm that the Voice of Wrestling also got offered a similar package with Fox. They offered me about $1 billion, but I told them I had to have Nick. And then, of course, they said that's like worth negative $1 billion. So I would pretty much have to pay them $1 billion to get the Voice of Wrestling on Fox alongside SmackDown. So we're going to stay put. Right about where we're at, which we're happy here on Voice of Wrestling.
Well, I was hoping you'd take the deal, because if you were paid $1 million a year to do the show, and then I had to pay $1 million a year to either maybe not even be on, maybe to stay off the show.
Just stay off the show.
I had to pay $1 million a year to stay off the show. Then we just break even.
We break, and
it's win-win. It's win-win for you because you get to be on the show.
Yeah.
It's win-win for me because I get to leave the house so I don't have to see my wife.
Right.
And then it's win-win for the fans because they don't have to see me.
You, and you free up your Tuesdays. So
I mean, this is like, to me, this sounds
so. Nick,
we're a legitimate third brand.
I've got to ask. Dave Meltzer posted something, Nick, about this deal and what it means as a product. You and I talked last week, I think, about the quality of as we talked about Ronda Rousey and the lack of a buildup for the title match between her and Nia Jax at Money in the Bank. And the quality of the product just speaking for itself. Like in our heads, that should be the bottom line.
Right.
The quality of the product. Dave Meltzer said, I think on a radio show or his radio show sometime this week, I saw where he talked about SmackDown would no longer be allowed to be the B show as it relates to Raw versus SmackDown and WWE or the fans' eyes. That this move now next year would force WWE's hand because of the pure amount of money involved, that it's kind of equal footing financially now. SmackDown is right there with Raw, therefore you've got to put your best foot forward. And I see that argument, but I want to kind of open the floor to discussion here, and we want to know what you guys think as well. But I can see it going the other way around, Nick, as well, in the sense that WWE could look at this as, look, I mentioned stockholders benefiting from all of this. The stock's literally never been any higher than it is right now. WWE's financial state has never been better, regardless of what the ratings are, regardless of what you think of Roman Reigns or the product in general or who you want to see on top. Vince has got to be smiling ear to ear right now. And so complacency is the word that I use. And by the way, Jonathan Coachman has his word of the weeks, which by the way, Coach just doesn't do it for me. I really was excited. I thought he would be good, but I digress. Yeah. But complacency is kind of my word of the week here because I really do see WWE, Vince McMahon, Triple H, Steph, looking at this as a major win, and they should financially, but it should not be indicative in my mind. They should not take this as some sort of attribution, Nick, of how good their product is, because I feel like that's. Well,
let me interrupt you right there. They will, but continue.
Well, yes, I agree. They probably They probably will. Unfortunately, that's the worst thing that they could do. And we're going to talk about All In and some of these other things. The independents really making kind of a comeback to a degree. New Japan, as hot as it's ever been. There's a void WWE is leaving in the wrestling business, and it's all good. I'm not saying WWE has to go back to the Attitude Era. I'm not saying they have to go back to ruthless aggression. I'm not saying they have to go back to the NWO days and cussing and live sex celebrations. None of that matters to me. I do think the quality of the product has been complacent for a long time, Nick. It doesn't seem like it's changing anytime soon. And things like this massive deal with Fox just gives them more credit than they deserve and in their own minds, and they're not going to have a need to change anytime soon. And so whereas Dave Meltzer thinks, no, we need, he talks about maybe some cosmetic changes, some announcer changes, speaking of, who gives a shit? Is WWE, because of this deal in your mind, Nick, going to get more complacent, or can fans maybe in your mind look forward to SmackDown becoming an A show, an AB or whatever, or the actual number one show for WWE? Is it complacency, or is it going to be progress or a betterment of the show in your mind because of this Fox this major, massive win for the WWE?
I think we have to look at Raw and SmackDown as two separate entities when answering that question. Because the biggest take I got out of this, and my initial reaction to it was, well, for those of you out there who feel that the WWE product is broken, it is not. It certainly is not. Or at least the people who make those decisions and the people who are paying for this product do not feel it needs to be fixed. So don't expect this product to be fixed in October of 2019 when SmackDown jumps over to Friday night, when, the new deal goes through for Raw to remain on USA Network. But again, though, in looking at this more specifically, I think you have to look at the two brands as separate entities right now, because in the case of Monday Night Raw, they're staying with NBC Universal. This is an outlet that they're very comfortable with. They've been working with NBC Universal. They've been on USA Network forever. So this is just business as usual. This is continuing what they've already been doing with USA Network. You got to look at NBC Universal and say, well, as far as they're concerned, they don't mind the fact that Roman Reigns is getting booed out of the building. They don't mind the fact that if people the Bobby Lashley sisters angle on Raw was probably the worst thing anyone's ever seen in pro wrestling. None of this matters to them. To them, the product is in great shape and it doesn't need to be fixed. Now, we know that because they have a history with WWE. On the SmackDown side of things, it's different. Not only are they entering into a deal with a new network that they haven't worked with before, but it's also network television, and it isn't cable. So network television standards are going to be a little bit higher. And it is too soon to predict how the product might change, because we don't know what the networks are saying to WWE. We don't know what Fox is saying. Fox might be saying to them, look, we're willing to give you all this money. We're willing to give you this $205 million a year deal for SmackDown.
Right.
But in that 5 years, we expect growth. Those ratings better go up. You're hovering right now at maybe around 2.5 to 3 million viewers. We want that up by 1 million viewers at the end of 2 years. Yeah. Or we could pull the plug on this thing, or you don't know if there are certain requirements or what Fox is demanding or sort of mandating on their end. And it's harder to tell in that case because WWE doesn't have a history with them. So what are their demands? We talked a little bit about this off the air, and I think it's worth reminding that WWE finds itself in an unbelievably lucky position when it comes to the entertainment industry, you know, I'm an actor. I've dealt with this before. I've written before. There is a constant battle in the entertainment industry between the creative team, the creative force, and the producers and the money. You know, you've got somebody who, let's take a show, for instance, The Walking Dead, you know, very big popular show. So season 1 comes out, and if I'm the writer of that show, I've got a trajectory. I know that this character is going to die off at the end of season 1, and then in season 2, we're going to go here. But the network comes to me halfway through season 1 and says, we've done a bunch of focus groups and we've done a bunch of tests, and the audience loves this small minor character. So we want that character to become a bigger character, a principal character in season 2. And I say, well, I had creative plans to kill the guy off at the end of season 1. Well,
right.
Sorry, you can't do that.
Yeah.
You need to make these changes that we want if you want the, you know, if we're going to continue backing this project. And that happens in everything, in film, in you know, you've got directors, top name directors, you know, guys like Brian De Palma. I remember in the 90s, he'd already made classic films, and he's struggling to get his movies made the way he wants them because the financial backers and the producers and the money are telling him, no, we want it done this way. WWE is in such a lucky position where, you know, and I presume they deal with network bullshit. I'm sure they've got people who are telling them this and that, and they're in their ear about, we prefer this, we prefer that. But they're not in WWE's ear when it comes to major creative decisions. You do not have the execs at NBC Universal telling Vince McMahon, put the belt on Ronda Rousey, put the belt on Roman Reigns, or we love Kurt Hawkins, make him the champion tomorrow, or we don't love this guy, fire him, get rid of him. When it comes to the creative decisions in that company, they are made by Vince McMahon and the creative team and WWE. So if you think that the networks are going to come in now with this big money and these new deals and change this product, you're wrong. It's not going to happen. Vince, the buck still stops with Vince at the end of the day. And all this deal is going to do, like you said, Chris, I couldn't agree with you more completely. This is just going to reinforce to Vince, you're doing it the right way. So for me, my gut reaction here is I don't expect the product to change very much at all. I expect some of those cosmetic changes to happen with SmackDown. They do it every time they change networks. Maybe, you know, maybe we'll see they'll do a roster shakeup, maybe, or they'll maybe change the announce team a little bit. They'll get a new set. SmackDown will have a new song sung by some terrible band, you know, and you'll be able to download the single on iTunes. You know, they may get a new look for the lighting design or something like that. But beyond that, I don't see this product changing. Now, I know that we want to, you know, I know we want to shift out of this a little bit, and we do want to talk about how this dovetails into the news that WWE will be expanding its pay-per-views to 4 hours. I do think, having said all that, Chris, and you tell me if you agree, the major revenue stream here now is through television rights. So I do expect there to be more focus on television. You know, there may be less focus on the next episode of Camp WWE and a little bit more focus on Raw, a little bit more focus on SmackDown. You may get some bigger marquee matchups. You may get the Daniel Bryan versus Shinsuke Nakamura on SmackDown, because, you know, the priority is going to be there. Do you see television becoming a bigger priority for WWE, you know, more so than it is right now?
I think in theory, maybe. I think in theory, yes, they're going to have to look at this as, it's just going to be an opportunity. I mean, knowing how WWE has been in the past, anytime they've changed networks, they go all out. I mean, for months leading up to it, you're going to be seeing a ton of marketing behind it, and I think they're going to want to put their best foot forward. Therefore, you are going to see some sort of changes, obviously.
And you know what? Let me just say, let me go on record as saying right now, let's remember this date, May 22nd, 2018. We're going to have a lot of deja vu that we've gone through in the past, where when SmackDown went to SmackDown Live, oh my God, it's going live. It's going Tuesday nights.
Right.
This is going to be the greatest thing in the world. It's going to change. There's going to be no more spoilers. The show is going to feel much more present because it's live.
Yeah.
And it was for a few months.
Right.
And then it typically reverts back to being that B show. And I want to be the guy that's going to put it out there right now to remember this date when we're getting close to October 2019, when we're in August, when we're in September, and WWE is hyping this thing,
right.
and we get a roster draft, and Roman Reigns and Ronda Rousey maybe come over to SmackDown, and oh my God, this is going to be the biggest thing since sliced bread. It's going to be the A show, and it is for the rest of October, and maybe even for the rest of 2019, through November, through December. That show, if Vince McMahon and the creative team want it to be, if it's the same Vince McMahon and the same creative team that it always has been, it'll dial itself back to being that B show after 6 months or so. And Raw will still be that flagship show that they want you to know is the flagship show.
One thing I want to do, Nick, I mean, you mentioned that TV, and I agree, TV rights and everything are a massive, massive part of WWE's gross profits.
Well, with this, but Chris, with this new deal, you could realistically eliminate everything.
Well, no. Yes, you could.
Take away the WWE Network tomorrow. Take away live events.
I don't agree. I don't agree with that because keep in mind that the WWE Network absolutely replaced pay-per-view profits, which were a huge deal back in the day. I don't know that you can take it away completely.
The only point I was trying to make there is they're still making a lot of money.
Yes, of course.
Even if you got rid of all those things, they're still making a lot of money.
My question is, I would like to dissect, though, the importance of, or maybe the difference and the amount of money that obviously the percentages, the percentage breakdown of where all of WWE's profits come from a standpoint of primarily two. I know that obviously everything else isn't going to compare to the TV rights and the network, but forgive me if I'm wrong, but I remember them mentioning that 1.2 million subscribers was break even. Now, I don't know what break even means in a sense of, does that cover virtually every aspect of them running their company? Is it just break even compared to what they would lose in pay-per-view buys?
My guess is it's break even for what they're spending on network content.
Just the network itself. Well, because then you look at their numbers and maybe it's not. I mean, they're probably grossing $1 billion a month, Nick, in gross revenue just from the network, most likely. I would imagine they have 1 million active subscribers by now. Obviously, they offer a ton of new signups and stuff, but I don't think the needle changes in that regard. But as far as I know, they've had well over 1 million subscribers, like 1.6 million or something, for quite some time now. How many of those are not active all the time? I don't know all the answers to that. That's why I would be really curious to the breakdown, because I think the network is still a major thing as it relates to WWE's well-being financially.
Sure.
That being said, It's relevant in this case because you talk about the importance of the product itself. To me, I'm going to flatline on this constantly. My go-to will always be the quality of the product because I think that translates to everything we're talking about here, Nick, from merch sales to TV rights and to the network and people subscribing. Here's the difference, though, Nick. I don't think they get this deal if the network doesn't exist. And the reason why is because now someone like Fox, they realize that, yes, besides WWE's long-tenured history of producing 2, at least, weekly shows that have maintained ratings throughout, which is really almost impossible to do in Hollywood and TV world, in Raw and SmackDown for so many years, 25 years on the Raw side, however many years on the SmackDown side. You're not taking as much of a gamble if you're Fox or if you're NBC as you would if you were renewing Last Man Standing, as it relates in this conversation. Therefore, I think that you're going to take a chance on something like WWE and Raw and SmackDown. However, 5 years in totality, over $1 billion. I don't know that you're going that far, Nick, unless you know that you are not only acquiring the rights to a very successful, long-tenured, and proven TV show, but also a company that has a built-in audience that is not going anywhere, as proven by the fact that people are willing to spend $10 a month for the over-the-top network that is still really remarkably one of its kind in the sports and entertainment world, that other people are now trying to duplicate and mimic because of the success WWE has had with it. I don't think you're getting that if it wasn't for the network. And even though, yes, all of this is related, I still I go back to just one flat thing of the fact is, all of this could be and should be better. For as good as WWE is right now, financially, the stockholders are happy, ratings are okay, longevity now with their TV shows, which are still the staple and the backbone overall of the product and the company itself. It can and it should be better. And I don't think that WWE looks at it that way. No. I think unfortunately they're taking this entire situation. They get to go tout this to everybody, and it's already being touted without them opening their mouths just because of the pure monumental size of it all. And yet we as fans now are going to continue, Nick, and later on in the show here in just a few minutes, you and I are going to continue the debate on whether Roman Reigns should be in the position that he's at. Are they using Ronda Rousey, who's one of the biggest female sports and entertainment stars of all time, and are they using her properly? And the answers to that, even though we're going to try in most cases, Nick, and give WWE the benefit of the doubt, the answers to those questions in most cases, by most fan standards, is a resounding no. And it will be for some time because WWE keep getting wins like the Fox deal. They keep being able to tout all the success in the world. But yet, we're going to talk about All In, so this is kind of a irony here too when you talk about Vince Russo not even being one of the things that he always talked about when he and I worked together, and of course he still talks about it all the time. What happened? Mark Madden, Nick, who you and I have worked with in the past, always talked about this. What happened to the other 5, 6, 7 million fans that have been lost over the past 15 years?
Absolutely.
Where are they at? And why does WWE not care about them?
Yeah, those are the people that don't like the product. And you're right that you cannot separate a television rights deal from a product because you still need that audience. I think what WWE knows, and where if there is ever complacency, is they know they're going to have that core audience. That 2.5 to 3.5 million viewers every week are always going to be there. They're never going to leave. The fact that you go run a building somewhere, a venue out in the Midwest, and you're going to sell 10 to 15,000 tickets to the event, they know they're always going to get that. They know if they book a major market for WrestleMania, like a New Orleans, like an Orlando, like a Chicago, they know that they're going to pack in, and they're going to, when they were at AT&T Stadium right there in your Texas, they know they're going to break the record there. They know they're going to go out to Levi Stadium and in the Bay Area and break records there. They just broke records in New Orleans. They know that they're always going to have those numbers to a degree. It's going to fluctuate a little bit up. It's going to fluctuate a little bit down. But they know what that medium is. And as long as they hit that medium, they're going to keep getting television rights deals like the ones they just landed. So now, like you said, the point should be, how do you get that audience? The audience, how do you increase that audience? And that's where I think people get confused. And this is a worthwhile discussion because people see a Raw rating and they say, oh my God, 2.7 million viewers this week. It's the lowest the show has done in 2018. And they panic. Oh my God, that WWE is going to close tomorrow. No. That's wrong. That's incorrect. They're not paying attention to that kind of a needle because they have the television rights deal. And as long as the network is happy and as long as the network is willing to pay for it, then that audience is fine for them because it's going to fluctuate up in a couple of weeks and it'll make up for it and it'll balance out at the end of the year at a certain median, right? Yeah. What they're not taking into consideration is that the product and only the quality of the product. Having, if you are a fan, Chris, that one of those 5 to 7 million people that stopped watching wrestling, if you turned your television on last night and you hadn't watched wrestling in years and you saw that Bobby Lashley segment, are you watching Raw again next week?
Nope.
Hell no. So the product at the end of the day is what's going to increase that audience. You want to get back to that 5 million, 6 million people watching your show, give the fans a better product. But at this point, at Vince's age, with just signing a historic deal, I don't see that happening.
Nick,
there's no real impetus there for that to happen.
Before we wrap up the main event and go on, I've got one more question for you. And this is a question that I'm going to really pose. Coming the aftermath of all of this, and this is really what just keeps sticking in my head now. As you were talking, as we've been talking for the past 15 minutes about this, I really am curious to this and to what fans, and eventually when we have some guests on, this may be a recurring theme at this point throughout this next 5, 6, 7 months for the rest of this year that I want to ask everybody because I'm really curious, and then we'll move on to some of the other topics that we have, and of course we'll extend this conversation a little bit as it relates to the pay-per-views now, changing to 4 hours that we're going to talk about in a minute. But Nick, simple question, maybe it's not simple, but one question to you now. Is WWE too big to fail?
Right now, for the foreseeable future, absolutely. I mean, remember, what are we talking about in terms of the audience that you're reaching? Look, if you're offering a product that is so bad that no one's showing up to the arenas anymore. I mean, they may have a huge television rights deal, but you can't run an empty arena show. Could the product ever get that bad that they're going to lose their entire fan base? I don't think so. I don't think it could ever get that bad given there's no competition to WWE. The only way I think it could fail is if real solid competition ever really came up,
but also
and started and gave the fans on Monday night or on Friday night something else to watch other than WWE. I know you have other options right now.
Yeah.
But look, we're going to talk about All In. Guess what? I don't live in Chicago, so I won't be able to see that event, and neither will you.
Right.
So we can talk about that. We can hype it as much as we want. The fans of professional wrestling can get as excited as they want about that event. But unless it airs, nobody's going to see it except for the 10,000 people that are going to be in Chicago that night.
Right.
Or whatever. Maybe they release some stuff on social media or anything like that. But, Impact, certainly that is something. You do have other outlets, other choices to watch right now, but nothing that's competing with WWE. So no, to answer your question, it's, yes, there's always the possibility that a company like that, it can fail and it can go under, but it is not happening anytime soon.
And I think in the literal sense,
it is not happening within the next 20 years, I'll tell you
and
that.
And I'll answer my own question. I think they are. I think they are too big to fail. And I say this, don't take it. Of course they could fail. Of course they could go under. Massive companies all over the place all the time are filing bankruptcy, and they have plenty of profits, or at least gross profits. They've got plenty of things going right for them, and then circumstances happen, and they go under. Now, I literally know they're not too big to fail, but it would take years and years and years and years and years of abuse, for them to completely fail and go under. But in non-literal but kind of literal terms, WWE is too big to fail. And I also say this, TV rights are great, Nick, but the network is by far the most relevant and important thing that the WWE has done since its existence. They have been able to eliminate pay-per-views, which by and large for fight promotions like UFC and boxing and what you used to consider pro wrestling, that was their bread and butter for such a long time. That was their business model. TV rights leads to pay-per-view buys. Obviously, attendance and merch and stuff is all part of that, but pay-per-views were by far one of the most important assets that they could have. Now, because of the way technology is changing, who knows where TV is going to be? Who knows if Fox 15 years from now is going to be able to afford to pay these outrageous numbers because of the way technology is shifting and more people are watching their favorite shows on anything but network and cable television these days. They're watching it online, and they're watching it on computers, and they're watching it on YouTube, and they're watching it on anything but actual TV these days. And I think we've only broached the subject of where that can go and the surface of where it can go. So therefore, I think WWE is too big to fail because of the network precisely, and the fact that they will always have a distribution network for their products. And even though I say that, I still stand by the fact that the quality of the product is going to be the end-all be-all forever, because they're not too big to fail in the grand scheme of things, and it's going to be a steady decline like it has been over the past 15, 20 years, Nick. It's going to continue going the route that it's going until WWE eventually has to open their eyes up. I agree with you that competition could play a factor at some point if and when some mega billionaire or millionaire decided they wanted to go head to head, and they wanted to be innovative, and they wanted to do things all the right ways. But I do also feel like if you look in the past 15, 20 years, and we just talked about the millions and millions of fans that no longer watch the classic line, Nick, of everybody on earth is, I used to be a pro wrestling fan.
Right.
And more people are using that line versus, I love pro wrestling. So it's past tense more than it is present. And I think that you can hide numbers and shift numbers. And yes, there's a solid 2 million, maybe, Nick, 3 million, as you mentioned, of diehard WWE loyalists that you claim will never go anywhere, and I claim they've been leaving in droves. I think they used to have 5 million loyalists that we could have said, or 4 million loyalists that would have been put in that number, and now it's down to 2.5 or 3. I feel like as they're catering to kids, which is smart in a lot of ways, but to me, you catered to kids when you were at your edgiest at the same time, because, I think that parents are loosening the reins. Fans, kids still wanted to watch it back then, even though it wasn't PG and family oriented. It didn't matter. The quality was so good, you just had to watch, no matter what age you were. So I to answer my own question and agree with you in a lot of ways, Nick, I do think at this time, without a question, they are absolutely too big to fail. And I'll end with this. I think that's scary. I think that's scary on so many levels. We're seeing signs of that now. I think this Fox deal, as we wrap this up, is just more evidence that Vince McMahon and Triple H and Stephanie have absolutely no reason, Nick, to change their tune on anything that they do. None. We want to know what you guys think.
And let me tell you this, too. You want to know what's really scary, and here will be my final thought on this. If you think, or if anyone thinks, well, now they've got this big money deal now. Now they've got Fox executives in their ear. Now they got NBC Universal executives in their ear because they're spending more money on the product. Guess who you really don't want booking a wrestling show? The television executives.
No kidding.
You don't want Fox booking a wrestling show. If this is the real scary thought, if Vince and Stephanie and Triple H and that creative team can't book a great wrestling show right now, don't think Fox is going to do it.
Yep.
Don't think some big wig at Fox Television is going to call Vince and say, "Hey, I got a great idea. Next week, let's do Bobby Lashley's twin brothers. Let's have those guys come out. And it'll be women dressed as men, and it'll be fantastic." That's because they don't know how to book a show.
Sure.
And there have been examples in the past of big wigs. You know, we saw it with WCW where executives were in the ears. The television executives, the network executives were in the ears of the creative minds saying, "No, we want this. No, we want this." And it never works. So if anyone thinks that anyone at Fox or anyone at NBC Universal is going to do a better job, unless that person comes from a rich professional wrestling background, you know, unless Paul Heyman lands a job as an executive with Fox and all of a sudden he's booking SmackDown, don't expect that product to get any better if all of a sudden Fox executives are in the ear of people like Vince McMahon. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think Vince McMahon's going to let anybody in his ear. It's Vince McMahon's way or the highway. But certainly don't think that the networks are going to bring you a better product.
We want to know what you think. Let us know on YouTube, on our Facebook page, wherever you're watching Fight TV. Let us know what you think. Is WWE too big to fail? And what do you think the most likely outcome of this new Fox deal is going to be? More complacency by WWE or a better product? Please let us know. This is the main event right here on The Voice of Wrestling. And we're back on The Voice of Wrestling. Chris Cash alongside Nick Paglino. And Nick, I know we wanted to expand a little bit on our main event from this week, and of course the big Fox deal, by talking a little bit more about some of the new things that are coming out. Maybe as a result of the Fox deal, maybe already in the books or had already been in the works. But the pay-per-views are now starting with Money in the Bank, expanding to 4 hours officially. So, Nick, give us some more details. I know ProWrestling.com has been reporting on this as well. Talk a little bit about what that means in terms of compared to what we've been having as far as a 3-hour pay-per-view and the kickoff show. Now, what exactly is it going to be, and why are they making this move now?
Well, you know, it's going to be very interesting to see how this affects viewers, how this affects numbers. You know, the shows now, the pay-per-views themselves will be starting 1 hour earlier. They'll be starting at 7 p.m. Eastern time. This is beginning with the Money in the Bank pay-per-view in June. So, you know, now, like has always been the case with WWE Network, and this is a big difference from traditional pay-per-view, the shows don't necessarily have to go the 4 hours. You know, WWE Network can do whatever they want. You know, they can, and we've seen sporadic pay-per-views that are supposed to be 3-hour events go a little over the 3-hour mark. You know, if they want to do the Talking Smack or the Raw Talk, which is that post-show, they may do it, they may not do it. But for the most part, what we're looking at here is a kickoff show starting at 6 p.m. Eastern, and a main show starting at 7 p.m. Eastern, which means if you are on the West Coast and you want to watch, you're dying to watch that kickoff show, you can't wait to see Apollo Crews in action on the kickoff show, that means you're going to have to start watching this thing at 3 p.m. your time on the West Coast. And then, you know, the potential is then for the pay-per-view to go up until 11 o'clock with maybe a post-show. So, you know, you could be looking at pay-per-view events that literally, if you consider the pre-show and the post-show, these could be going 5.5 to 6 hours of full show, with that main pay-per-view show being about 4 hours long. And the impetus behind this is because these are dual-branded pay-per-views now. So they want to get more talent on these shows, and really the only way you can do that is by expanding the amount of time that they last. This way you can feature, those mid-card. This way you can really feature the mid-card and the upper card from both Raw and SmackDown. So that's the decision-making behind that. And Chris, here's the thing. Coming on the heels of this major television deal that was just announced, the idea of the pay-per-views, then, almost in the same breath, we're now learning that the pay-per-views are going to expand to 4 hours. That sort of backs up that argument that you made earlier in the show tonight, that the WWE Network is still a vital component to the WWE machine. Otherwise, they probably wouldn't be investing more time, and then that means more money into lengthier events on the WWE Network. It's probably because, they want to focus on more on getting more talents on there, and maybe they think it's going to yield a better show. And I'll put it to you, Chris, my gut tells me it's not going to yield a better show. People have been complaining about the lengths of some of these big four pay-per-views. Look at Royal Rumble, SummerSlam, Survivor Series, WrestleMania, 4-hour events. The common complaint that comes out of a lot of these events is they were too long. Yeah. When you factor in the pre-show and the post-show, these events are too long. So I really don't know, how is it going to translate to a live crowd? Are they going to be, are they going to get wiped out a lot earlier because they're sitting through an extra hour of show? If they got there early for the pre-show, they're sitting through 2 extra hours of show. My gut tells me that, unless you're really booking phenomenal matches from top to bottom here, I don't see how this is going to better the pay-per-view product.
No, and I agree with you completely. I think that in the end, this again goes back to just quality of product. And I think WWE fans can handle, especially as co-branded, maybe you're not getting as many every year. Obviously, they cut back on pay-per-views. I don't think 4 hours is too long for fans to endure pro wrestling. The problem is just a matter of, does WWE really have the creativity and the talent to justify 4 hours, and the fact that they rarely have the creativity to justify 3. It's really, really hard to say that they're going to change now. But again, are fans really going to care besides your big major pay-per-views? I mean, this is one of those situations now with the network in place, Nick. You can kind of go and watch the pay-per-views as you want. And so you do kind of have it on demand, and it's not something that you necessarily have to be there live all the time for. So I feel like they'll treat most pay-per-views as they treat a Monday Night Raw, for example. If you want to watch it live, you watch it live. If you don't, you don't. 4 hours, 3 hours doesn't really matter.
Yeah, because if you look at the network numbers, even now, here we are, and we're nearing the end of May. WrestleMania 34 is still one of the top 5 most watched shows on the WWE Network every single week. It was last week, I mean, and actually, as a matter of fact, you continue making your point. I'm going to actually look that up so we can take a bit of a closer look at that actual figure.
And I think that, look, at the end of the day, I feel like WWE's the pure amount of pro wrestling that you have every single week with Raw, SmackDown, the pay-per-views, of course. If you watch NXT, if you watch 205 Live, of course, the network in general, but specifically the live action shows, that's been a problem for WWE for many, many years. I mean, 3 hours on Monday Night Raw, 2 hours now, 4, on SmackDown, 4 hours now on the pay-per-views, the kickoff shows, the extension of the pay-per-views for the SummerSlams and the WrestleManias. It's always been a situation where the amount of hours that they have for first run television and, of course, pay-per-views, It's always going to be, which is why I try. And Nick, you and I have matured over the years that we've been doing the voice of wrestling, and the fact that we're not near as cynical as we used to be. We may still be negative in a lot of cases. We may still be cynical where we feel it's needed, and that's still the case probably 50 at least % of the time, because most of the time WWE gives us plenty of reason to be negative. But I feel like benefit of the doubt needs to go to the fact that they do have such creative writers. When you don't have seasons, you don't have breaks, you don't have off seasons, when you do have literally 5 hours of primetime television every week to fill, it is a very incredibly challenging task.
Sure.
They can afford all the help they need to make it better, but still, I think the length of products and now, of course, the extension of these pay-per-views is just, it's one of those situations where, again, too big to fail. WWE doesn't look at this as a big deal. They probably have their reasons for doing it financially, even if it just moves the needle 0.5%. I don't know what the exact explanation is going to be for it, but in the end, they have no reason to assume that their model isn't working. What's an
Absolutely
extra hour on pay-per-views, Nick, when everything else seems to be literally Charlie Sheen winning all over again, all the time for WWE? They have very little reasons to think that any of this is going to move the needle in the wrong direction.
Absolutely. And two key points that you bring up there is, number one, the idea that with the on-demand, with the WWE Network, you can always go back. Yeah. So if you're not watching these things live, and I'm looking at the numbers right here. The number one most watched show of last week on the WWE Network was Backlash. So it was the pay-per-view from last month that people were watching, that they're catching up on. Yeah. The Greatest Royal Rumble was the 7th most watched show. Yeah. So people are going back and they're still watching that event. The Greatest Royal Rumble pre-show was the 10th most watched show on the WWE Network. Wow. So they're still watching these things. They're still consuming this product. They're just doing it in a different way, and that's what the WWE Network allows you to do. Sure. So these events do have that replay value, and they know that they can capitalize on the audience after it airs. Yep. So it becomes a good necessity there. But one of the other good points that you made, too, is this idea of not having seasons. And that goes back to why, because a lot of people may be scratching their heads, too. Why is WWE such an attractive product to television outlets, to the NBC Universals, to the Foxes? Yeah. One of the reasons why is because they never take a break. If you're ABC and you've got The Big Bang Theory, when that season finale airs, ABC is sitting there chewing on their nails, just waiting for that show to come back. Right. Because that's their cash cow. When a season of The Walking Dead ends, you've got AMC saying, we can't wait for this show to come back. HBO's dying for Game of Thrones to come back because these are their big cash cow properties. WWE never goes away. So these networks know, Fox knows, NBCU knows, every single week, our show is going to be there. That's true. Raw is going to be there. SmackDown's going to be there. We're not going to take a 3-month hiatus. How long's Game of Thrones been off the air? It's going to be off the air for almost 2 years before it returns. They're not taking these massive breaks. They're there every week. That live show, that live sports/entertainment show is going to be there every single week. So before we wrap up and get out of here, a couple other things that we wanted to talk about. All in, Nick. As you mentioned, you and I won't be able to watch the event unless, which my bone to pick with Cody, kind of just fast and to the point, is if they don't stream this with all the technology out there. There's plenty of companies out there, Nick, that will come and do it. It's not. No, I don't think that's the issue, though. The issue is that with the amount of talents that they're using, a lot of these guys are under exclusive television. They're under exclusive deals with promotions that will not allow them to appear on other television. So you got a guy like a Naito who may be appearing at All In, and he's signed with New Japan. He's not allowed to appear on another program or another pay-per-view, So, and that's what he's doing here, is that he's using talents from Ring of Honor, from New Japan, from really from everywhere that are signing for this thing. And those guys, their deals allow them to work. Basically, this is a house show. This is a live event. That's what this is. And they're allowed to work those, but they're not allowed to work the televised.
But see, here's the thing then. I think
outlets. So in that case, I think there's still ways, you can obviously still air this thing, and you can have those talents there. So they just don't appear on camera.
Sure.
They appear in the pre-show dark match, or they do the dark match after, or when they run a commercial break, you got a guy that comes out and, a big name, he cuts a promo or he does something like that. WWE's done that before, where you do something over a commercial break or during an ad break or something like that. So, that's not to say that it couldn't be done, but that's the biggest holdup right now in streaming this, that it could potentially mean that 50 to 60% of their talent wouldn't be able to work the event then.
I think then, that's a failure on the front side in the sense that they should have thought about that, because I think keep in mind, I understand that maybe this was kind of drummed up in a very quick fashion. They've admitted publicly in press conferences that they didn't really know what they were doing and didn't know
or what to expect.
And that's and I fully understand that. And I think obviously as they now look towards the future, if this thing continues to be as big of a success as it seems like it's going to be, that those are things that they will probably think about going forward. As a fan of pro wrestling in general, this is probably the first event that I would go out of my way to watch outside of a WWE event or occasional TNA event in the past. This is something that has caught my attention, piqued my interest. I would love to check it out. And unfortunately now, you're only going to be able to do that through clips, torrents, some sneaky way, or whatever they release publicly. There'll be cameras there. It might not be streamed or put online, in a pay-per fashion. And so I think that's something that they needed to think about. I definitely feel like there are ways around it, as you mentioned, Nick. And keep in mind, they're being given the blessing by the Ring of Honors, in some cases probably by New Japan. They could probably negotiate with these guys and work it out. But I guess, Nick, a couple of thoughts as I look at this, because there's some outstanding questions of whether CM Punk will appear. We can go into some of those things, but none of that really matters until after the fact. I mean, CM Punk appearing at their show would be awesome. There's the comment. I think there's two questions or two thoughts that kind of run into my head as it relates to All In. One, Nick, it makes me wonder the plans for the future as far as someone like a Cody Rhodes and the Young Bucks, and when they see that, hey, we have been able to generate this buzz, can we strike lightning, or can lightning strike twice? Can we keep it going? Can we do it again and again and again and make a promotion out of this, obviously? Is that in the works, and is it something that could happen, and should it happen, and would fans be interested to see that happening, or is this kind of a one and done massive buzz deal, or kind of like the ECW reunion shows? Yes, you can get a few times out of them, but it's not something that can sustain truly long term. And then finally, Nick, I think that the other question and the other thought that it raises for me anyway is that clearly this event has proven without a question in my mind that if done right, with the right marketing and the right people behind it, you can create a legitimate buzz in the wrestling business outside of WWE. Sure. There is room for a second, because I don't look at an Impact, and I don't even look at Ring of Honor, even though they have some sort of a national presence with Sinclair and everything. To me, it's still a far cry from actual competition to WWE. And I'm not saying it would happen overnight, but I think with social media, with the right people, with the right money, I do think that honestly right now is the best time, regardless of WWE's contracts with guys, Legends contracts, all these things that they have wrapped up into a lot of your big stars of yesterday. I feel like stars of tomorrow, guys like Cody Rhodes, the Young Bucks, people that you do not know about based off of, as far as mostly from WWE television anyway, outside of WWE stars, are being able to drive this to 10,000 tickets sold in a matter of minutes. That is such a huge feat this day and age, and I think it proves what's possible. And whether it's Cody Rhodes and major backers that come in to this gimmick, or whether it's somebody else, because I would think that would be less likely than maybe eventually somebody else starting something separately.
Sure.
I think this goes to show that fans, A, would love to have it and would love to support it. But B, this goes to show how much you can do, as the theme has been, on our main show, our whole show has been about the Fox deal and this monumental thing. What you can do in the wrestling business without a huge, massive deal like WWE just got with Fox.
Sure.
Or TV deals in general, Nick. Because to me, if you can sell 10,000 physical tickets, how many people would watch this damn thing if it was being streamed online? I mean, you would be in the tens of thousands, if you wouldn't break 100,000 people. I would imagine the route they were going, the buzz they've created. I wouldn't have been surprised if you reached over 100,000 people with an online pay-per-view stream if they had the opportunity to do that. And that's saying something this day and age, without TV, without a whole lot of money, Nick. I mean, it does show that to me, there's really never been a better time, honestly, for someone with the vision and the creativity and the connections and the resources and the money to truly say, I want to do something in the wrestling business. There's enough opportunity out there. And maybe on just a very small level, Nick, All In is kind of signs that is possible.
Without a doubt. Especially we saw how fast the interest was there. This event selling out in under 30 minutes, 10,000 seats, historical, yeah. And it does show you that and absolutely, this show is going to be presented. I don't even, without even knowing, with only knowing one match and that was the other thing. They only announced one match.
That's insane.
At the press conference,
yeah.
And you don't even know who's going to be the NWA champion come October. The assumption is it will be Nick Aldis, but it might not be. So all you know is Cody Rhodes is challenging for the NWA title. It's the only match you know. But we do know that this show is going to be presented very differently from WWE. This will be an in-ring heavy product. And so it shows you that there is a want for that. There is a want for a plethora of different styles of wrestling right now. And that is certainly one of them. And that's very refreshing to know that the casual fan is not just interested in some silly sketch with Bobby Lashley and his sisters.
Well, I want to say congratulations, Cody Rhodes, all of
Absolutely.
You guys, and much luck to the continued success of All In, and I can't wait to report on it once it takes place. And obviously, if more comes out before the event, we'll talk about it. But otherwise, congratulations on the huge feat of 10,000 in a matter of 30 minutes. It's huge. Before we get out of here, though, Nick, a couple of more things that we'll run down and kind of quick fire at you and see what you think. First, we have to mention our Roman watch. What did you think about Roman Reigns and some of the things that he said actually in public? A lot of interview, a lot of press in the past week and a half, 2 weeks, obviously calling to attention the fact that he really isn't much of a baby face because he's not being cheered. There is no denying any longer that pretty much anywhere he goes, he's going to be booed heavily versus being cheered. They are now calling that to attention, at least allowing him to publicly talk about it. He had some interesting things to say in a recent interview or two. So What do you think about his comments, though, Nick, and the fact that he's kind of already a heel since he is being booed so heavily at this point?
I don't really buy it completely. I don't think the definition of a heel is how the crowd responds to you. I don't think crowd boos makes you a heel. And honestly, I feel like that's a bit of an excuse to say that. Really, he's still being booked as a babyface. He's teaming with other babyfaces. He's not doing anything that is of a typical heel. Some of his comments may be, sort of dickish. He may come off as sort of arrogant. He may be less, he may be less friendly in the ring than maybe certain guys like the Finn Balor's and the Seth Rollins and the Daniel Bryans when they cut their promos. But that certainly doesn't make him a heel. I really think he's kind of the definition of a tweener right now. They've kind of got him towing that line a little bit, but he's still a baby face.
Yeah.
And so I can't accept this logic that he's a heel because the fans boo him. Because at the end of the day, I think they're still just rejecting where he's at. I mean, this is a guy who's opened Raw the past how many straight weeks. He's in that opening segment, and fans are rejecting that more so than they are rejecting his behavior as a quote-unquote bad guy in the ring.
Well, and I think, at the end of the day, he may be a heel in the fans' eyes, but he's not necessarily a heel in the most important eyes, and that's of Vince and Stephanie and Hunter, because he's still, and I don't buy it at all, he's not a heel, he's a babyface. He's
look at how he was booked on Raw.
Teaming with Seth Rollins.
Seth Rollins is your biggest babyface in the company right now.
Feuding with Jinder Mahal. Clearly, WWE is still positioning him as a babyface. By and large, there is no change in that. They're just calling down.
I think maybe what his overall point is I'm getting a reaction.
Sure.
There's no denying the fact that Roman Reigns gets one of the biggest, if not the biggest reaction of the night.
Yeah.
And it's like we talked about, it's that John Cena effect where this idea that they've sort of drummed up in their mind, WWE, is if we get the reaction, that's the only thing that matters.
On the other side of the Roman watch is the Ronda watch, Nick, and I swear WWE management watches our show because we talked about how bad that announcement was for the title match last week, and yet here they are this week calling out the big guns and Stephanie McMahon to come out and help put this feud over in what I thought was a really pretty decently well laid out segment and contract signing, if for no other reason but because Stephanie McMahon did all the talking and literally said the lines for each girl back and forth. Stephanie was money. She's always money in these types of situations. I give it at least a thumbs up. It's 100% better than where it was, where we started last week, though, with a lot more, still a lot of room left to grow as far as this feud. But Nick, what did you think of it?
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. I thought the execution of it was good. I certainly see why. I know a lot of people hate the fact that Stephanie's there. They don't want to see her involved in this feud, but she's there for a purpose. She's there to help these two. We saw them on their own at the NBC upfronts. It was awful.
Yeah.
They needed something. They needed that, like you said, that sort of guiding force in there to help them along, and that's exactly what Stephanie McMahon did. She did it very well. I thought Rousey came out looking good with her stuff. Nia Jax, the same thing. My complaint about it is I still just don't like when Stephanie McMahon is positioned as the brains in these situations. They both came off, Rousey and Nia Jax, and the WWE does this to all their baby faces. They make their baby faces look so stupid. Why would either of them listen to Stephanie McMahon or allow Stephanie McMahon to get into their heads?
Yeah.
I mean, it was so easy for Stephanie to immediately get into Ronda Rousey's head and to immediately get into Nia Jax's head.
You're right.
You'd figure by now people know not to listen to Stephanie McMahon. So I had a gripe from that standpoint because it's again just Stephanie McMahon so easily manipulating the baby faces to the point where it makes them look dumb. But otherwise, I thought this was executed well, and I'm looking forward to the match.
Couple more random thoughts and questions to you, Nick, before we wrap up with this week's edition of The Voice of Wrestling. We had Plan B with Kevin Kelly for many years here on The Voice of Wrestling, and now we've got the B team on Raw. Curtis Axel, the other schmuck. What's his name?
Bo Dallas.
Bo. I knew it was Bo, but I was thinking Bo Riley or something. I don't know what the hell his name is. Bo Dallas, Curtis Axel. Look, I'm getting kind of a kick out of it, but I'm curious to your thought. And how far can they go? We know it's a comedy gimmick. We know they can only go so far. But sometimes these things work, and this might be the most excited I've ever been, well, for a tag team in a long time, but especially for these two, who I think are really kind of coming into their own here.
Yeah, I mean, look, you can look at this one of two ways. If you want to look at it as glass half empty, it looks like, Matt Hardy cut some promos after Raw last night, aiming them at the B team. It looks like they could be headed into a feud with the B team. If you've got Matt Hardy and Bray Wyatt as the champions feuding with the B team, that does not speak very highly of the state of your tag team division
I agree with that.
on Raw.
They're long, yeah.
But I'm saying what?
I was just they're a long way in my mind of being a credible tag team. So let me start with that.
These guys are already challenging for the Raw tag titles.
Yeah.
You can look at this from a purely sort of competitive sports angle that, wow, this does not speak very highly of the tag team division on Raw. But you can look at it, if you want to look at it from the glass half full standpoint, it is fun. I've enjoyed seeing them get these wins. They're celebrating this undefeated streak. It's a nice change of pace. You're used to seeing guys like Curtis Axel and Bo Dallas lose. I mean, I think there was some stat that came out before last week. I don't think either of them had a televised win. They were something like 0-81 in 2018. So it's nice to see something different, which is that these guys are picking up some wins. So I'm going to agree with you to a certain extent. It's fun. I don't know what kind of payoff this is going to have, though.
Well, but I want to give, for those of you WWE management that do watch this show, I'm going to give you an easy idea. I think Corey Graves, after they won their match on Raw this week, said something about a bandwagon. And the first thought that came to my head was they need to literally get a wagon, one of the kids' wagons, and they talk about how we're picking up fans. Fans are getting on the bandwagon, one fan at a time, something along those lines, and literally bring a wagon out and invite people to jump on their bandwagon.
You call it the B wagon.
The B wagon, and yes, exactly. Bring them the B or the BN wagon. Bring them out. Literally have a fan every week jump up on the wagon and them just roll them out every week because they're gaining fans 1 week at a time. Copyrighted here at The Voice of Wrestling. So
they better do it for $2 billion. They better have fans in a wheelbarrow.
As excited as I am about the B team, though, Nick, I thought I was excited about Sami Zayn giving some purpose to Bobby Lashley, but then this week happened, and the quote-unquote sisters of Bobby Lashley comes out on Raw, and wow.
This is just another example of, you take a guy like Bobby Lashley and in his great, raw, natural form in Impact, and then when he was also wrestling in Impact, he was also fighting in Bellator. He was the fighter. I mean, that's his name on Twitter, Fight Bobby. He's the pure athlete, the pure fighter. This just goes to show you, and it's not going to change, that when you come to WWE says you play by our rules.
100%.
And our rules state, in our world, you have to be a character. You have to beat up your sisters that are men that are dressed as women. And this is what you have to be. We can't allow you to be that thing that you naturally are great at. Well, we have to infuse that artificial personality and that character.
But here's the other problem of that.
Here's the problem. It was a disaster.
And I go back and find the archive of the Voice of Wrestling where I talked about Bobby Lashley when the rumors started circulating that he was coming over, and I talked about anybody dreaming of a Bobby Lashley Brock Lesnar match, or the idea that not only would WWE actually think highly of him enough, but yet the fans would think, because you can blame some of this on WWE, especially this week. You can damn sure blame this on WWE Creative. But ever since he's come back, he came back all wrong. The fans have not remembered him like they should have. They have not been on his bandwagon like they should. Fans, WWE management, nobody in that company, in that organization, or the ones following it are putting Bobby Lashley on any level to where he would be any credible threat to someone like a Brock Lesnar, much less at this point even a Sami Zayn after this week. And so it's been nothing but an absolute failure for Bobby Lashley, who I've said time and time again, one of the nicest guys in the wrestling business, and I hate it for him. But he needs to take his ball and go home. I don't care what the payday is. He doesn't need it. I don't care that he's on TV. I don't care if he's having fun. He won't be having fun much longer. This is going to be an absolute failure of a return. I can already call it in my mind. They'd have to do something miraculous to turn this thing around. And I feel very bad for Bobby Lashley. But lastly, Nick, on the agenda, we recently heard that John Cena and Nikki Bella might be getting back together. I'm sure it has everything to do with him pouring his heart out onto the Today Show or whatever that show is he goes on there. Yeah. And he even had me all teary-eyed and emotional. And I think at the end of the day, the world is rooting for them, Nick.
Oh, yeah. I mean, my wife, you can't see her. She's on the couch right now, just hysterical. She's just watching reruns of Total Bellas. And, and she just can't wait. She can't wait for that wedding. She wants that wedding to happen because, hey, it'll give us an excuse to go down to Mexico and cheer them on. I mean, we won't be allowed anywhere near the wedding. We'll probably be arrested.
Do you think deep down...
But we're going down there to that wedding.
Do you think deep down, Nick, maybe this was all a ploy? We just had the big royal wedding, and Nikki and John specifically, maybe they didn't want to be overshadowed with their wedding, and so they decided to mastermind and manufacture this huge breakup that is now, with tabloids involved and everything, has become its own huge scandal. And thought, maybe this was all masterminded by the genius that is Nikki Bella and John Cena, and maybe it's just all been a big work. You and me and your lovely wife, we've all been worked.
Oh yeah. Their relationship has Vince McMahon's booking written all over it.
Yes, it does. Anyway, guys, we appreciate you tuning in to the Voice of Wrestling. Went a little long for you this week. Had, again, plenty to talk about, and we'll do the same thing next week. We appreciate you guys tuning in. voiceofwrestling.net. Check us out on all our social media. Subscribe to all that bullshit. Check out prowrestling.com, of course. And, of course, check out Fight TV. Download the app where you can listen to us every Wednesday evening. I'm Chris Cash alongside Nick Paglino. This is the Voice of Wrestling. Until next week, enjoy pro wrestling, everybody. We'll see you then.